I'll be presenting the Last Supper painting, which was created by Leonardo da Vinci. And some background information on this painting is that Leonardo created it at the monastery church in Milan, Italy, called the Covenant of Santa Maria della from 1495 to 1498. And he was recruited and reached out to by the Borgia and Sforza families, which were two very popular families at the time. Ludovico Sforza was the Duke of Milan, and he helped commission the painting in his favorite church because he wanted to bring popularity to his name and also have it at his favorite church where he could see it pretty often, and he wanted to brighten the church up and make a great painting for the church. So the Sforza family ruled in Milan from late 15th century until 1535, so they were in command for a while. And with the Borgia family, Rodrigo, who was later known as Alexander VI, was the Pope during the creation of the painting. And him and Ludovico teamed up together to get Leonardo to create this painting to help boost their popularity. So with the Last Supper's popularity, it helped bring the family's fame and political success and helped people love them, and it attracted people to them because it was arguably one of the most famous paintings ever. So if you can associate that with your name, then good things are going to come. So it helped create a movement during the 15th and 16th century in Europe. And a quote that I was able to find by Ross King, who was a historian, says, "It was the most copied painting of the next century, not only in paint, but also in marble, wax, and terracotta." King said, "Everyone wanted a version of it, and Leonardo had finally created the work of fame which he dreamed about." So that really says a lot about the painting. If a historian from today's day and age is able to tell the popularity of a painting 400 or 500 years ago, and if he's able to tell the success that it brought for these two families. So with the success and fame and with the movement in the 15th and 16th century, it helped the Christian and Catholic influence grow. The painting had a huge religious impact on these two groups of people because the majority of the people in Europe and Italy during this day and age were Catholic or Christian. And the Last Supper shows the night before Jesus was arrested to be crucified, which was arguably one of the biggest moments in Christian history. I mean, if you're a Christian, that's the first thing you think about is Jesus getting crucified. So it was a huge deal for them to do that. And this actually took place in John 13:21. So if you want to read it, you can go check that out. But people from all over came to Milan to see the masterpiece, or they tried to have copies of it ordered or created, and they wanted it in their house. They wanted it everywhere. It was huge, and it really helped show the brilliance that Da Vinci was. So here's a picture of the painting that I was actually able to take when I saw it in person in Milan. I went with my mom 2 summers ago, and the painting was breathtaking. It was as big as a whole side of a room. It was a lot bigger than I expected it to be, and it was easily 400 inches wide, and it was beautiful. I wish I could go see it again. So if you get the chance to ever go see it, or you're in Milan or Italy, I highly recommend going to see it. And on the next slide, on the right-hand side, you can actually see a layout of how the disciples and Jesus are sitting at the table, and it tells you which one is which. So you see Jesus was in the middle, and then you have all of his disciples accompanied by him. So, but some background information on the Last Supper is that it actually took place in Jerusalem, and it was Christ's final meal with his 12 disciples before he was arrested for being an imposter by claiming he was the Messiah. So in the picture, he actually reveals that one of his disciples was going to betray him, and that's the exact moment with all their faces when they were in disbelief. So yeah, it's amazing how he was able to draw their faces and actions, and you see how one guy on the left-hand side has his hands up like, "No, not me," and they're just freaking out, not knowing who it would be. So they all claimed that they would never do that and they would never deny him. But then the next morning, when Jesus was arrested, Peter actually denied him 3 times when he was in this circle by the temple. So it says a lot about the time when this happened. So some history behind the painting is it actually was not the first Last Supper that was created. There was 2 copies created before it that were made by Da Vinci's assistants, and as you can imagine, he oversaw the creation of the paintings, and he instructed them and told them how to do it and where to put it and how things should be. So you can still see these two paintings nowadays. They're just not as popular as the main one in Milan that he created by himself. But one of them on the top is located at the St. Imbrogio Church in Switzerland, and the one on the bottom is located at the Royal Academy of Arts in London. So he called the third copy his masterpiece. I guess he got his assistants to make the first two so that he could really see what it looked like himself and visualize what he wanted to change or what he wanted to add. And as you can see in the top one, there's circles on the windows, and the bottom one, they're just straight square windows. So, I mean, it's just how he wanted to do it. He was a genius. So he actually wanted to spend years to make sure he got the facial expressions right, especially Judas, since he was the main disciple that was being talked about during the event because he was the one that betrayed Jesus. So it's pretty cool that he spent that much time and detail on his paintings. It really showed he loved what he did. So he was a genius in many ways, and he actually left secret messages. You can see in the zoomed in picture on the right hand side, Judas with his right elbow is actually knocking over salt, and that's where you get the saying, "Don't knock over the salt, it's bad luck." It comes from this painting because Judas betrayed arguably the most important person who's ever walked the earth, and it shows that he knocked the salt over when Jesus confronted him about betraying him, not directly but indirectly. So. And Dan Brown, who was the author of the Da Vinci Code, said there was many other hidden messages within the painting. He said there was secrets about Christ's life, and he said that there was mathematical secrets within the painting and astrological codes that say the world was going to end on March 21st, 4006, which is a while from now. But it's kind of crazy that he was able to predict that and show that in the painting. And he also was able to show a musical sheet that consists of 5 lines that goes along with the disciples' hands and the bread. So I thought that was also amazing that he was able to do that in the picture. And sadly, over time, the painting has dealt with a lot of neglect and abuse. And it was an oil tempera painting that was placed on the plaster of a dry wall. So it was hard to preserve. It was hard to move around. You couldn't take it out of the room. And 20 years after it was created, it started to flake, and it started to get moisture and smoke on it, which helped make it decay faster. And in 1652, the monastery actually cut a hole in the painting that made a door so they could get through, and it cut out Jesus' feet and cut out part of the table. So it showed that they really didn't have any appreciation for the painting, and it was more the Borgio and the Sforza families that had the appreciation for the painting, and obviously Da Vinci and his assistants. So another bad time for the painting was when Napoleon's men invaded Milan, and they used the church as a stable, and they thought it was funny to throw bricks at the faces of the painting, and they messed up the faces pretty badly. And in 1800, the church flooded for 15 days, causing the walls to mold from all the stagnant water in the room, which caused water to get on the walls. And it's been through a lot of stuff, especially when in World War II, the church was bombed and it caught on fire. And luckily the painting didn't catch on fire as well, but it still dealt with a lot of problems from that bombing. So throughout all of these problems, the monastery has attempted 7 different restorations in the following years. And author Henry James said that it was the saddest work of art in the world. And that's crazy to think about, that someone thinks the saddest work of art in the world was the best and most famous piece of work ever. So it's just crazy to me how this all fell apart. But some high degree and technical skill that was involved in the painting was pretty obvious, I think. There was an immense amount of detail and skill throughout it. And Da Vinci, who was not only an artist, but he was an all-around genius. Throughout his life, he did different creations with math, with anatomy, with all types of stuff. And he left secret messages everywhere, and he always was trying to teach people, and like Raphael and all of his other apprentices, and he was a genius. And yeah, so some of the effectiveness during the period when the painting was created is pretty obvious because On the right hand side, you see the Duomo, which is the famous cathedral in Milan. And after the painting was created by Da Vinci, the Borgia and Sforza families drew all of the attention away from things like the Duomo and made people go to the painting, which was associated with them, which helped boost their political power and boost the name of their families. And it gave all the religious people an image to rely on and look at and dwell on, which is what they wanted. So it helped make an icon for religiousness for a long, long time. I mean, my mom has copies of the Last Supper in our house on postcards, and she has a painting of it, and that just really shows the popularity and effectiveness that the painting had. So I think the meaning and the focus of the painting shows shock and concern by the disciples' faces when Jesus broke the news to them. They all didn't think that there's no way that any of them would betray him, and they all thought they were super loyal to him. But I think you can tell by Judas that he's nervous because he's the only one that's kind of leaned all the way on the table looking at Jesus, kind of like, oh snap, he's on to me. So it's kind of cool. It shows foreshadowing of what was to come. And it kind of shows how the disciples did not trust Jesus fully, and shows how the focus was to remind the public to stay true in what they believe in. You know, people these days and age can easily forget about stuff, and Da Vinci didn't want people to forget about how the disciples were so close to Christ, but at the same time they were so far away by how they were astonished and in disbelief. If they were completely 100% loyal to him, they wouldn't have denied him the next day, and they wouldn't have betrayed him, and they wouldn't have ran from him and not wanted to claim him when he was going to the cross. So the artwork was actually made with oil paintings and tempera on a plastered wall. And Da Vinci did this because he wanted to take his time creating the painting, and he didn't want to rush it. He didn't want the paint to dry fast. So when you combine these two, it's easier for you to slow down the drying process and prolong your time to edit the masterpiece. So he did it very carefully, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. Like I said earlier, it was his third time making the painting, so he really was prepared to do his best job on this one. So here's my work cited. Thank you for listening, and have a good rest of your day.